Okay, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you again. Thank you for joining me. We'll start the read along as ever at sort of 9 o'clock. But while waiting, if anybody wants to pop any questions in the chat, then you are very welcome to do so. Just before we sort of start off, let's have a quick recap of what's happened so far. Quite a lot's happened, actually, hasn't it? There's been a lot of laying out of the story, first of all. So we've got Utterson, and we love Utterson. We're supposed to love Utterson. Utterson is a good guy. Stevenson's at great pains to point out that he is a good guy. He might be quiet, he might look sort of gruff, but he is selfless, he is loyal to his friends, he is kindly. He's got all these sorts of qualities that Stevenson wants us to understand matter. Okay, so we've got him. We've got his mate Enfield, who he goes for walks with, and who tells him this extraordinary story of this strange, ugly little man who marches over the body of a young girl and who is brought to a sort of justice by a mob who are raging for his blood. And when they do this, he gets out of the situation by presenting a check signed by somebody else. And of course, we can start to make an assumption now from what we've read so far. We can start to assume that that check was probably signed by Dr. Jekyll, because Utterson is instantly really quite disconcerted by this story. So Utterson's heard this story, and in the second chapter, we have Utterson now thinking back to something else that has happened to him previously. And his friend, Dr. Jekyll, he's now established that there is this guy, Jekyll, who is his friend, has given him a will, which is not unusual. Utterson is a lawyer, that's what he does. But this will basically says that if anything happens to Jekyll, if he disappears for more than a set amount of time, then Hyde gets all his stuff. And this is a bit weird. This is not how wills normally work. And it's suspicious. Utterson's thinking, well, what does this guy have on Jekyll? What is the link between him? And he talks to Lanyon, his other friend. These three men are supposed to be great friends: Utterson, Jekyll, and Lanyon. And Lanyon is a scientist like Jekyll, but he is described as congenial and friendly, but also very much a rational man. So whereas Jekyll is considered as being possibly a bit flighty, Lanyon is as a man of science and sense. Lanyon says, I don't really have anything to do with Jekyll anymore because he's gone a bit weird, frankly. So Utterson is determined to go and have a conversation with Jekyll about what has been going on. And he goes to visit him. If you remember, he's not at home. Paul, the servant, who we'll find out more about later on, opens the door to Utterson, and the result is that Utterson is now even more worried because he's looking around the house going, where is Jekyll? Why is he not here? Why does Paul know about this guy Hyde? What is going on? And this is where we left it last time. So we are going to take a look at chapter 3. Now, it's only a short chapter, and we're going to talk a little bit afterwards about some of the kind of some of the detail surrounding the context of this book. We're going to have a look through this, and again, we're going to be looking at particularly at character, and I will be annotating as we go, just as we have done before. So this one is called Dr. Jekyll Was Quite at Ease, which is nice because Utterson definitely isn't. A fortnight later, by excellent good fortune, the doctor gave one of his pleasant dinners to some 5 or 6 old cronies, all intelligent, reputable men, and all judges of good wine, and Mr. Utterson so contrived that he remained behind after the others had departed. Just pause again, because look, here we've got more stuff about what makes a good person, intelligent, and that word reputable again. It's all about being reputable. And Mr. Utterson so contrived that he remained behind after the others departed. This was no new arrangement, but a thing that had befallen many scores of times. Where Utterson was liked, he was liked well. That's kind of a lovely line, isn't it? Hosts love to detain the dry lawyer. When the light-hearted and loose-tongued had already their foot on the threshold, they like to sit for a while in his unobtrusive company, practising for solitude, sobering their minds in the man's rich silence after the expense and strain of gaiety. To this rule, Dr. Jekyll was no exception, and as he now sat on the excuse me, on the opposite side of the fire, a large, well-made, smooth-faced man of 50, with something of a slyish cast, perhaps, but every mark of capacity and kindness. Something of a slyish cast. A little foreshadowing here, isn't there? A little hint that all is not as it should be. You could see by his looks that he cherished for Mr. Utterson a sincere and warm affection. "I've been wanting to speak to you, Jekyll," began the latter. "You know that will of yours?" A close observer might have gathered that the topic was distasteful, but the doctor carried it off gaily. "My poor Utterson," said he, "you are unfortunate in such a client. I never saw a man so distressed as you were by my will, unless it were that hidebound pedant Lanyon, at what he called my scientific heresies. Oh, I know he's a good fellow, you needn't frown, an excellent fellow. I always mean to see more of him, but a hidebound pedant for all that. An ignorant, blatant pedant. I was never more disappointed in any man than Lanyon. You know I never approved of it," pursued Utterson, ruthlessly disregarding the fresh topic. "My will? Yes, certainly I know that," said the doctor, a trifle sharply. "You have told me so." "Well, I tell you so again," continued the lawyer. "I've been learning something of young Hyde." The large, handsome face of Dr. Jekyll grew pale to the very lips, and there came a blackness about his eyes. "I do not care to hear more," said he. "This is a matter I thought we had agreed to drop." "What I heard was abominable. It can make no change. You do not understand my position," returned the doctor, with a certain incoherency of manner. "I am painfully situated, Utterson. My position is very strange, a very strange one. It is one of those affairs that cannot be mended by talking." "Jekyll," said Utterson, "you know me. I am a man to be trusted. Make a clean breast of this in confidence. I make no doubt I can get you out of it." "My good Utterson," said the doctor, "this is very good of you. This is downright good of you, and I cannot find words to thank you. I believe you fully. I would trust you before any man alive, I before myself, if I could make the choice. But indeed, it isn't what you fancy. It is not so bad as that, and just to put your good heart at rest, I will tell you one thing. The moment I choose, I can be rid of Mr. Hyde. I give you my hand upon that. And I thank you again and again. And I will just add one little word, Utterson, that I'm sure you're taking good part. This is private matter, and I beg you to let it sleep." Utterson reflected a little, looking in the fire. "I have no doubt you're perfectly right," he said at last, getting to his feet. "Well, but since we have touched upon this business, and for the last time, I hope," continued the doctor, "there's one point I should like you to understand. I have really a very great interest in poor Hyde. I know you have seen him. He told me so, and I fear he was rude. But I do sincerely take a very great interest in that young man. And if I am taken away, Utterson, I wish you to promise me that you will bear with him and get his rights for him. I think you would, if you knew all, and it would be a weight off my mind if you would promise." "Can't pretend I shall ever like him," said the lawyer. "I don't ask that," pleaded Jekyll, laying his hand upon the other's arm. "I only ask for justice. I only ask you to help him for my sake when I am no longer here." Utterson heaved an irrepressible sigh. "Well," said he, "I promise." And that's chapter 3. A very quick chapter, but an important one because it's the first time we see Jekyll. Beforehand, we've seen sort of allusions to him. We've seen mentions of where he lives. And we've had him talked about, but that's the first time we actually see him. Most of the time, he is in the background. And that's really, really worth noticing, that the people we see mostly are the likes of Utterson. So we could say, thinking about getting down notes for our characters, most present of all the characters. And things are revealed through him, aren't they? We've got Lanyon now. We can say he's been described as a hide-bound pedant. Now, pedantry, if you don't know what that word means, pedantry is when you are really, really picky. You're really overly concerned about details. We often talk about grammatical pedantry and that sort of thing. People who get very upset about using less or fewer incorrectly, for example. And this is what he's saying about Lanyon. He's just really picky. Sometimes it's important to be picky, though, isn't it? Sometimes details do matter. And then we've got this other thing. We've not got anything down about Jekyll yet. So let's just start to think. What we know so far is a long-standing friendship with Utterson and Lanyon. We know this. We also know something sly about him. We know that he has fallen out with Lanyon. And we know that he has written a will which favours Hyde. Okay, so that's where we are at the moment. Now then, I just want to very quickly just give a little bit of context before we do anything else. Just thinking back to what we know about London at the time we're talking about, and here's a picture of the Strand in London for around the time this book was set. And this is what we need to have in the back of our minds as we're reading this book. This kind of busy area, but with lots and lots of little alleyways. Down in between these buildings, there are alleyways where people can take shortcuts, where people can hide if necessary. And London has very much two faces. There is a glamorous, exciting, wealthy aspect of London, the Ritz and the theatres and things like that, where there is hustle and bustle and there is noise and excitement. And then there are these dreary, dark alleyways where the poor have to live, where people who are up to no good do whatever it is they are doing. And this idea of darkness, of things hidden away, of things under the surface, is a really important part of Jekyll and Hyde. So we will talk more next time. As we are reading, do feel free to send me an email if there's anything that you want me to go over, or pop things in the chat as we read. We'll be here at the same time again tomorrow when we'll be doing a little bit of chapter 4.